Welcome to Whispers of Untold Fears, where the shadows speak, and the silence hides more than you can imagine. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and let the whispers begin. I can't explain what happened next. It's the strangest thing that has ever occurred to me or anyone I know personally. I work late hours at a dive bar about 30 minutes from home. It's not exactly by choice, it's just how things go when you live in a rural area. There aren't many jobs nearby, so you take whatever you can get. The bar itself isn't anything special, but it's steady work, and most nights are uneventful. The night this happened was just like any other. My shift ended without much going on, and after closing up, I got in my car to drive home. Most of the drive is through winding back roads. There's hardly any traffic, no streetlights, no cars, just long stretches of curves cutting through woods and farmland. Honestly, I've always liked it because it's so quiet. It feels like a built-in detox where I can zone out or think about the characters I met at the bar and the conversations I had. But that night, something was off. I remember thinking how unusually foggy it was. I've driven those roads countless times, but that night, visibility was worse than I had ever seen. I had to slow down because I could barely see more than a few car lengths ahead. Even with my high beams on, it didn't help. The fog just reflected the light back at me, almost like I was driving into a wall of white. It started to frustrate me because I knew it was going to add time to my trip, and I was already exhausted. About halfway home, I noticed something strange. Through the fog, a faint yellow blinking light appeared just off to the right side of the road. At first, I thought it was a roadside marker or maybe a reflector, but as I kept driving, it didn't seem to get any closer or farther away. It stayed at the same distance, blinking steadily, like it was moving with me, staying just deep enough in the fog to keep pace. It felt strange. I couldn't tell how far away it was, as the fog seemed to mess with my sense of depth. After another minute of driving, with that blinking light still hovering in the same spot, I started feeling a strange unease in my stomach. I can't even explain it. Something just didn't feel right. I decided to slow down, thinking that if I eased off the gas, the light might move, and I'd finally get a better idea of what it was, or it might just fade away, and I wouldn't have to deal with it anymore. But as I slowed to almost a crawl, the light didn't change at all. It kept blinking steadily, still maintaining that same distance off to the side, moving perfectly in sync with me. That's when I really started to get freaked out. I finally came to a full stop, just to see if it would do the same. Sure enough, the light stayed in place, blinking in the exact same rhythm. I sat there for a moment, trying to make sense of what I was looking at, debating whether I should turn around or keep going. That's when it changed. The blinking didn't stop, but the light itself grew brighter, like a small flame suddenly catching a gust of wind. It wasn't flashing faster, but it was burning stronger with each pulse, like whatever it was had suddenly become more intense. That was enough for me. I wasn't about to sit there and wait for whatever it was to get any closer or stranger. I reached down to shift into reverse, but that's when I realized the engine wasn't running. It was completely silent. I couldn't understand how that was possible. The only way to stop the engine would have been to turn the key, but I distinctly remembered not doing that. Why would I? My hands were shaking at this point, and that freaked me out. My hands don't shake. I pour drinks all day, for crying out loud. As I desperately tried to start the car, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever that light was, it had something to do with my engine dying. I tried the ignition again and again, but it was dead. Meanwhile, that blinking light just kept getting brighter and brighter, almost like it was feeding off something. My heart was racing. I had no idea what was going on, and there was no one around for miles. Feeling hopeless, I grabbed my phone, hoping I could at least get some video or call for help. But when I tapped the screen, nothing happened. It was completely black. I knew for a fact I still had at least 20% battery. I had checked it at the bar before I left. But now, it was just as dead as the engine. Before I could do anything else, the light suddenly flared up to a blinding brightness, like an exploding star. I physically couldn't keep my eyes open. It was so bright that I had to throw my arms up to shield my eyes and keep them shut for at least 10 seconds. It felt like a massive light bulb was right in front of me. And then, just like that, it was gone, like it had never been there at all. The fog was still thick, but there was nothing out there anymore. My heart was still pounding, but I instinctively reached for the ignition one last time. This time, the engine turned over like normal. Without wasting another second, I drove the rest of the way home, my eyes glued to the road, afraid that if I looked away for even a second, that horrible light would return. But nothing else happened. Nothing strange at all. I've told this story to almost everyone I know, my family, friends, even a couple of regulars at the bar. But no one has come up with an explanation that sits right with me. And trust me, I've heard every theory you could imagine. A couple of years ago, I was on a long haul as a truck driver. I've been doing this for years, so I'm pretty used to the long stretches of empty roads. This particular night, I was making my second to last delivery of a cross-state loop, just trying to get it over with so I could head home. The road had me driving through one of those desert highways that hardly get any traffic at night. No towns for miles, no gas stations, barely any lights. It was just a 2-lane road cutting through the open desert under a sky full of stars. It's the kind of drive where you start to feel like you're the only person left on the planet. About an hour away from my next drop-off, I first noticed it. I glanced into one of my side mirrors and was surprised to see a dark SUV trailing me. It wasn't riding my bumper or being aggressive. It was actually keeping a good distance, but it was definitely following me. No matter how fast or slow I went, it adjusted to match my pace. For almost 40 minutes, it just stayed there in my mirrors, always visible, always maintaining that same odd gap. The driver never tried to pass, just stayed back like they were waiting for something. At first, I thought maybe the driver was too afraid to pass me, thinking it was illegal or dangerous. But that idea didn't hold up after I drove through several passing zones. I suppose it was possible they didn't know what a passing zone was, but that seemed pretty unlikely. As curious as I was, I had a job to do. I couldn't waste the whole night figuring out what was going on with the person behind me. So, I tried to ignore it. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't help but glance back at the SUV every so often. It was really starting to get under my skin, which isn't something that usually happens to me. Around 2:00 a.m., I decided to pull over at a small roadside rest area. It wasn't a full truck stop, just a dirt lot with a few faded parking spaces and a small shed with a couple of vending machines. There were no lights in the lot, except for one dim bulb flickering above the vending machines. I figured I'd stretch my legs, grab a soda, and more importantly, let the person behind me pass. But when I glanced back before shutting off the engine, I saw that the SUV had pulled in too, parking all the way at the far corner of the lot. At that point, the confusion and discomfort turned to full-on rage. Whoever was driving that SUV was about to hear it. I stepped down from the cab aggressively and started heading toward the car, not even trying to hide my frustration. But as I stomped toward it, whoever was inside must have realized I was coming. Before I could even get close, the SUV's engine roared to life, and it peeled out of the parking spot like it was running from the cops, kicking up a huge cloud of dust and gravel. As the SUV sped past me, I tried to catch a glimpse of the driver, but the windows were tinted, and I couldn't make anything out. I watched as the car shot back onto the highway, tires screeching. Within seconds, it was gone, just a flicker of red tail lights fading into nothingness. Part of me felt relieved. I wouldn't have to deal with that annoying SUV anymore, and I could finally get on with my night in peace. But another part of me felt deeply unsettled. I had pretty much confirmed that whoever was driving that car had been following me for some unknown reason. And what was worse, they clearly didn't want me approaching their vehicle, which meant their intentions were probably hostile. As I walked back from the vending machines, by the way, they were completely empty, making the stop a huge waste of time. I realized just how drained I felt from the whole experience. My energy was completely zapped, and the last thing I wanted to do was get back on the road. I figured I deserved at least a short break after everything. A quick nap, maybe an hour or two to recharge before finishing the route in the morning. I did a quick walk around the rig, double-checking that the cargo doors were still locked and everything was secured tightly. Then, I climbed back into the cab, reclined my seat, cracked the window slightly to let in some air, and settled in for a bit of rest. By that point, the lot was completely quiet, and for the first time all night, I actually started to relax. My logic was that, even if that person did mean me harm, there was no way they'd turn around just to keep harassing me. If they wanted to come back, finding the lot again would be nearly impossible. They'd be searching blindly in the middle of pitch black desert. The combination of exhaustion and the quiet made it easy to fall asleep. If I had to guess, I was probably out within minutes. I should mention, though, that I'm a really light sleeper, probably one of the lightest. In this line of work, you kind of have to be. Sleeping in sketchy roadside spots all the time develops a sixth sense, like a third eye. If someone's messing with your rig while you're asleep, it could cost you everything, including your life. So, being able to wake up at even the faintest sound is crucial. About an hour after falling asleep, I was woken by the faintest noise, a light crunching sound, like footsteps pressing into the loose gravel. Even though I was groggy, I had enough sense to stay quiet. I cracked open a corner of the window blind to peek outside, and sure enough, there were two figures crouched by the rear wheels of my trailer. They were inspecting the lower latch mechanisms, clearly trying to figure out how to open them without making any noise. They were being pretty quiet, but I noticed one of them had a small flashlight and was using it to signal back and forth to the other. I couldn't make out their faces, but it was obvious what they were up to. I didn't have any weapons on me. Normally, I don't, but if it came down to it, I was ready to defend my rig and my load. This was my livelihood. As I watched, one of the guys reached into a small bag and pulled out what looked like a pair of bolt cutters. That was it. Without thinking, I slammed my palm down on the horn, sending the truck's air horn blaring. Their reaction was instant. Both men jumped like they'd been struck by lightning, then scrambled back toward the roadside brush. Less than 10 seconds later, I saw headlights appear out of nowhere. It was the same SUV from earlier, roaring back into view with its lights still off before whipping around and disappearing into the night again. I didn't even have time to step out of the cab before it was all over. Once things calmed down, I called the police. Honestly, I was mostly just calling to report the incident and have it on record, but they insisted I stay put until a unit could come check things out. It took a while, but eventually, 2 officers arrived and helped me inspect the truck. Sure enough, there were fresh pry marks on one of the lower lock arms of the trailer, right where those guys had been messing around. Fortunately, they hadn't gotten it open. The officers told me they had seen this kind of thing before, cargo thieves. Apparently, it was a lot more common along that stretch of road than most people realized. They figured the SUV had been following me for a while, waiting for the right moment to strike. That night remains the most unsettling experience I've ever had. There's nothing like a night drive, especially in the summer. Picture this: the warm breeze flowing through the open windows of a speeding car, cutting through endless stretches of highway. That's what it's like around where I live. There aren't many cars on the road at night, no cops either. So, I essentially have free rein to drive however I please, and trust me, I take full advantage of that. My dad's BMW M3 definitely helps in that regard. Don't get me wrong, I'm not reckless or driving criminally fast, but I do enjoy testing the full capabilities of German engineering every now and then. This night was one of those times. I was joyriding, cruising along the highway with no care in the world. The stereo was off, and the passenger seat was empty. My ears weren't focused on music, but on the beautiful sounds of the car and the wind rushing past my face. Driving like this is one of the few things that makes me feel truly free. At one point, I had this insatiable urge to pull off the highway and hit some back roads where I could really appreciate the car's handling. You know that feeling when you get an intense urge to do something, even if you don't know why, but you just can't ignore it. That was exactly how I felt. So, I pulled off at the next exit and started cutting through a network of back roads, weaving through whatever neighborhood I had landed in. The roads were narrow and filled with tight bends, exactly the kind of driving I was looking for. I let the car open up a bit, taking the turns just fast enough to feel the tires grip and release. The streets were completely deserted. It was just me, the car, and the road. That is, until I spotted a flicker of light up ahead and slammed on the brakes just in time to avoid smashing into it. Once I came to a stop, I finally got a clear look at what I'd almost hit. It was a shopping cart just sitting there in the middle of the road, like someone had wheeled it out and left it. The way my headlights bounced off the metal bars must have been what caught my eye and made it seem more dramatic than it really was. Still, it completely threw me off. It's not exactly normal to find a random shopping cart sitting dead center in the middle of a back road at nearly midnight. Against my better judgment, I put the car in park, turned on my hazard lights, and stepped out to take a closer look. I probably should have just kept driving, but my curiosity got the best of me. The whole thing felt so random and out of place, and I had this weird need to make sense of it. The night air hit me immediately, warm but a little buggy, and the only sound was my cooling engine ticking away. I walked up to the cart, unsure of what I might find inside. Groceries, maybe. No, that was ridiculous. I mentally scolded myself for even thinking that. When I looked inside, I saw it was completely empty, just an ordinary metal shopping cart sitting in the middle of the road. I stood there for a few seconds, but when I realized there was nothing strange about the cart itself, I turned to head back to my car. That's when I saw, out of the corner of my eye, two dark figures suddenly break out from the farmland beside the road. They were sprinting full speed toward me. It took a second for my brain to process what I was seeing, but in that moment, it was life or death. My options were simple: either act or die. I bolted back to my car and hit the start button. The car roared to life as those figures reached my car window. One of them stopped just a few feet away from my car, but the other one sprinted directly into my passenger side door, slamming into it with a deafening thump. He didn't even flinch, as if my car were invisible. He was running so fast he didn't brace for the impact. We locked eyes, and all the confidence I had just moments ago vanished. I was frozen. He stared at me with two beady, bloodshot eyes. His clothes were torn, as if he'd been running through thick brush or barbed wire. His hair was messy and wet, and his face was smeared with something dark, dirt, blood, or maybe both. He had this unsettling, vacant expression on his face. It wasn't exactly a scowl, but it wasn't a smile either. I've never been more terrified in my life. There was blood spurting from somewhere on his body, but he didn't seem to notice or care. He must have realized I wasn't going anywhere, because he started fiddling with the door handle, trying to pry it open. That was all I needed. I snapped back to reality, maneuvered the car around the shopping cart, and sped off. The whole drive home, I was conflicted. I was still shaken up and scared, but part of me also felt like that person needed help for his wounds, and he wasn't going to get it. I thought about going back to check on him, but ultimately decided against it. Instead, I called the police while driving. They said they'd send someone to check out the spot I described. When I finally got home, I parked in the driveway and got out to inspect the car. I needed to see the damage. That's when I noticed blood spattered across the entire passenger side door, way more than I expected. It was streaked along the side mirror, smeared across the handle, even dotting part of the rear quarter panel. There was also a slight dent near the center of the door, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. But the amount of blood, that's what really got to me. It was far more than I would have thought from that brief impact. It was an inhuman amount of blood. The next morning, my dad took one look at the car and completely lost it. He didn't even give me a chance to explain before he started yelling about how irresponsible I was, how I should have never taken the car out that late, and how much it was going to cost to fix the paint and the dent. I tried telling him that it wasn't my fault, that something happened out there that I couldn't have predicted, but he wasn't having it. To him, all he saw was his car covered in blood with a dented door, and that was enough. He figured I must have hit a deer or something. Eventually, he did come around to what had happened and was actually pretty sympathetic, but only after I got the car cleaned up. And let's just say, that was one of the last times he let me go joyriding after dark. I think I can explain what happened that night. Those people, probably homeless, had tried to lure someone out of their car with that shopping cart. I was that unsuspecting person. They just hadn't been fast enough to get the jump on me before I took off. I never heard back from the police, but I wasn't really expecting to. Part of me feels like I shouldn't care, but I can't stop thinking that an impact with my car might have ended someone's life that night. You've just heard the whispers, but some fears never end when the story does. If you dare for more, subscribe and let the untold fears find you again. In the dark.